Hey guys, here's a quick homework help video for tonight. First of all, we talked about it in class, but it's not listed on the homework anywhere, but a shaded in circle is a negative and an open unshaded circle is a positive. So you've got some questions on your homework tonight that show these models. And so obviously you've got all negatives in all three models, but I'm going to show you some examples that have some negatives and one that has a positive. But when you see a group of counters like this, you're representing a total, and obviously there's 8 of these, so we're representing a total of 8. But the way that they're arranged, and since we are talking about multiplying and dividing integers, then what we're showing is multiplication. We're showing 2 times 4 equals 8 because we have two groups. Here's the first group of 4, and here's the second group of 4, and that's a total of 8. It could technically, since they're both positive, this could also be 4 groups of 2, which gives you 8, because you could look at it this way and say, well, here's 1 group of 2, 3 groups of 2, 4 groups of 2. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4 groups of 2. You could look at it either way when they're positive. When they're negative, sometimes it's not that easy. You can't have negative groups, so you wouldn't ever say I've got a negative amount of groups. What I mean by that is if you had this model right here, you wouldn't say, the answer to this is obviously -6, because there are 6 and they're negatives, but you can't have -6 groups of 2. That doesn't make any sense. You can't actually have negative groups. You either have groups or you don't. So in this case, you have 2 groups of 3. Here's one on the top and one on the bottom. So you could look at that as 2 groups of -3. So 2 times -3. You could also look at that as 3 physical groups of -2. So you could also look at it as 3 times -2. Either one of those would be okay. Now, even though -2 times 3 gives you the answer of -6, that doesn't match the picture because you can't have -2 groups. And even though -3 times 2 also gives you the answer of -6, you can't have negative groups, so that doesn't fit the model. Only these two do. When you see models like this that have obviously been sectioned off or put into groups, then that's a huge clue that you're talking about division, because that's what division is it's dividing things into groups. So in both of these examples here, you can see a total. In this one we had 3, 6, 9, so we had a total of 9 negatives being divided by, as you can see with the circles, 1, 2, 3 groups. So there's your -9 divided by 3, and that's going to leave you with -3 inside of each group. -3 here, here, and here. Similar over here. You started with a total, started with a total of -6, and you divided that into 3 groups so that you can see with these outlines here, 1, 2, 3. So you physically divided them into 3 physical groups, and you've got -2 inside of each group. So ones that have these outlines where you can see that they've put them in groups, those are going to be division, and ones that don't are going to be multiplication. So you've got some big time clues right there for your homework tonight when you're doing problems number 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let's talk about these number lines for a second. When you have a number line, you're just looking for the size of the jump. So if I look at this number line here, the first problem with this number line here is I shouldn't be starting at -2. I should be starting at 0. So let me get rid of that first line there. That doesn't make any sense. There we go. That's better. So I'm starting at 0 here, and you can see that my jump is, so I jumped 2 this way, 2 more to get to 4, and 2 more to get to 6. So my jumps are a size of 2. Okay, you can't, 1 is in there, and 3 is in there, and 5 is in there, but you can see I'm jumping over that. So I'm taking 3 jumps, and every jump has a value of 2. So I'm jumping 3 times in the positive direction, and each jump is worth 2. So we know that 3 times 2 is 6. So this model goes with 3 times 2 is 6. If you look at this one, you can tell we're going to have a negative answer because we're ending up on the negative side here, but you can't do negative jumps. So you see I've got 2 jumps here. I can't say that's negative 2 jumps because it's not. It's you either have jumps or you don't. You can't have a negative amount of jumps. We physically have 2 jumps, but they're in the negative direction. In this case, we've got 0, 1, negative 2, 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7, negative 8. So the value of this jump is from 0 to negative 4. That is 4 in the negative direction. And then this one is also 4 in the negative direction. So each jump is a value of negative 4. So 2 jumps of negative 4, and that's going to land on negative 8. So a couple of helpers to help you as you look at the homework tonight. And then just last 2 here. On these word problems, read them carefully. Some of them you're going to be able to do a model that's a number line. Some of them you're going to have to do a counter model. It just depends. You're going to find that one model is going to fit it and the other model is not. So you may have to do a little trial and error with your models to see which works. This one says the water level dropped 3 inches every week for 4 weeks. By how much did the water level change? It's dropping 3 inches, so that is represented by negative 3, and it's doing that 4 times. So negative 3 times those 4 weeks. So I just made a quick number line, and I went ahead and counted by jumps of negative 3 on my number line because that's what this problem is talking about, going down by 3. So this was like week 1, it went down 3 inches. There's week 2, it went down 3 inches. There's the next week, it went down 3 inches. And then there's one more, it went down 3 inches. So you'll have to pay attention and see what the value is going to be there when it goes down. The solution can be found just by multiplying them here. Okay, and I'll leave that for you to fill in. This one down here talks about 2 groups of negative 8. So this is a lot like the ones we talked about here. It's 2 groups of negative 8. So you can see on the top, I've got a group of negative 8, and on the bottom, I've got a group of negative 8. And so there's really no other way to model that. You could do this one on a number line as well. So this one could be either. This could be a number line or counters. All right. Again, we're going to solve it. 2 groups of negative 8. And I'll let you put the answer there, but I do want to remind you of the rules for multiplying and dividing integers, and they're very simple, and here they are. If you take a positive and you multiply it by another positive, then you know the answer is going to be positive. You've been doing that since 3rd grade. But we learned today that a negative times a negative is also a positive. And then we learned that if one of them is negative and the other one is positive, that's how we get a negative answer. And it doesn't matter if you start with the negative or if you start with the positive, you're still going to get a negative answer. So those are the rules for multiplying integers, and the rules for dividing integers are no different. So once this becomes a division symbol, nothing changes. Positive divided by a positive is a positive. A negative divided by a negative is also a positive, just like over here. And then when you have one of each, one is positive and one is negative, and that's how you get a negative answer when you're dividing. And again, it doesn't matter if you start with a negative or start with a positive. As long as you have one negative in there, you're going to have a negative answer. So these rules are identical for division and multiplication. You don't have to learn new rules for each one. Okay. Hope that helps you on your homework tonight. We'll go over it in class tomorrow. Make sure you've got some answers for us to look at. Thanks.